subset of climate migration. That seed of interest then blossomed when I was invited up to CSU in October of 2014 to hear and meet Mary Robinson, first woman president of Ireland, former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, UN Special Rapporteur for Climate Change, recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom, member of the Elders, a group of senior international leaders formed by Nelson Mandela, and president of and founder of the Mary Robinson Foundation. Now, clearly, that's somebody, given the opportunity to meet somebody like that, you would want to listen to that person very carefully. While listening to President Robinson, I had one of those aha moments, perhaps not as profound as Paul on his way to Damascus, but very much life and perspective changing nonetheless. I wish all of you at least to have one or two of those aha moments in your life as well. President Robinson and I followed up with a very long conversation and then kept an email conversation and dialogue for many years following that meeting. Her work inspired me to create a course on climate justice and then to take my sabbatical in Aotearoa, New Zealand, to work with Maori and Pacifica colleagues on climate migration and climate refugees, and to create a brand new course that I'm teaching for the first time this quarter on climate migration and human rights. The subtitle of that course is The Tsunami. Now, perhaps you have not had any firsthand experiences with the tsunami. That would not be unusual, but most of you have seen video clips of tsunamis as they have hit the coast of Japan, for instance, or rolled into a luxury resort on an island nation in the Pacific somewhere. I also hope that most of you know what the signs of an impending tsunami are and what you should do. If you should find yourself on the beach playing in the sand and surf, and suddenly you watch as the water recedes quite rapidly and moves way past the low tide mark, what should you do? Anyone? Run. Thank you. Yes. And as fascinating and as unusual as the sight may be, you should immediately run to higher ground. Don't pick up your cooler. Don't stop to get your towel and your umbrella. Turn around and run. But sadly, that's not what many people do. They stare transfixed like a deer in headlights, and only when it is clearly too late do they finally turn around and try to run. This is where we are now. The water has already receded, and we stand dumbstruck, staring out into the ocean. Perhaps you have also seen on these clips, video clips, what a tsunami wave actually looks like. It isn't the seemingly 200-foot waves cresting majestically and terrifyingly in its awesome qualities that you see in some disaster movies. From land, it is sometimes almost imperceptible to the eye. As it draws closer to land and encounters the ocean shelf, it starts to rise up. Tsunamis may be as long as 60 miles in width, but the average height is only 10 feet. But when a 10-foot, 60-mile wave hits at 100 miles per hour, the wall of trillions of gallons of water wreaks unimaginable havoc. And it isn't just one wave. A tsunami wave train can come as a series of surges anywhere from 5 minutes to 1 hour apart. Now, climate migrants are known by a number of different kinds of terms: climate refugees, climate mobility, and environmental migrants, to be a few. The term that seems to capture the imagination of the public is climate refugees. But what is a climate refugee? The term has been used since 1985 when UN Environmental Program expert Ihsan El-Hennawi defined climate refugees as people who have been, quote, forced to leave their traditional habitat temporarily or permanently because of environmental disruption. But Amar Rahman, global head of climate resilience at Zurich Resilience Solutions, believes that the definition should apply to, quote, anyone who has been impacted by disruption in their society that could somehow directly or indirectly be related to short or long-term change in the environment. Unfortunately, this doesn't match the international legal definition of a refugee. We have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948, which guarantees that everyone has the right to freedom of movement and residence within the border of each state, that everyone has the right to leave any country, including his own, and return to his country, that everyone has the right to seek and enjoy in other countries asylum from persecution, that everyone has the right to a nationality, and that no one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his nationality nor denied the right to change his nationality. The 1951 UN Refugee Convention defines a refugee as a person owing to well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group or political opinion, is outside the country of his nationality and is unable, or owing to such fear, is unwilling to avail himself of the protection of that country. So a refugee has to cross an international border. If they don't, they're an IDP, an internally displaced person, and are not covered by the Refugee Convention and all of its resources. And even if they flee across an international border because of a short-term environmental disaster or long-term environmental issues that make a livelihood impossible, they are not covered by the Refugee Convention. So some of us had the bright, if naive, idea of changing the Refugee Convention to include climate refugees. Changing the language of a convention isn't an easy process. It takes a gathering of 193 nations to agree upon a new protocol to the convention. But it had been done before with other conventions, so why not the Refugee Convention? I have to say, what we didn't expect was the massive pushback by UN organizations tasked with dealing with refugees. At this point, the term climate refugee is actually verboten in places like Geneva and Vienna. Instead, they use the term environmental migrants. Why is this? Well, it's because the UN High Commissioner for Refugees is already completely overwhelmed by refugees that they have. Here are some numbers. There are 108.4 million forcibly displaced people worldwide. 62.5 million are internally displaced persons. 29.4 million are refugees as understood by the Refugee Convention. 52% originate from only 3 countries, Syria, Afghanistan, and now Ukraine. 70% of refugees are hosted in 5 neighboring countries, Turkey, Iran, Colombia, Germany, and Pakistan. 43.3 million, or 40% of the 108.4 million, are children below the age of 18. And between 2018 and 2022, 1.9 million children were born into refugee life per year. 4.4 million people are stateless. They have no place to return. And 90% of refugees under the UN mandate are from countries, quote, quoting from the United Nations, on the front lines of the climate emergency. The top 10 refugee camps, some of whom have been in existence for decades, hold 2.2 million of those refugees, the largest being in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh with 887,000 refugees. Bangladesh is also one of the poorest nations, yet hardest hit by climate change and their own IDP crisis. So keep these numbers in mind. I'll repeat them a little bit when we get to the numbers of climate refugees. We know that we're hoping to have only a 1.5 degree change or increase in global temperature. That will bring major effects on warm water coral reef ecosystems, specifically impacts on vulnerable ecosystems and species, especially the polar regions, wetlands, and cloud forests. Increase in coastal and river flooding, increase in extreme weather events, increase in the spread of tropical infectious disease, increase in heat-related morbidity and mortality. Also keep in mind that 40% of the world population lives within 60 miles of the coast, as we get concerned about the rise of sea levels. 50% of the United States population, which lives within 50 miles of the coast. That accounts for 167 million of us. And 40% of those, or 134 million, are vulnerable to sea level rise in the United States. 20% of the Earth will be a hot zone by 2070. What's a hot zone? A hot zone is a place where agriculture is almost dead, where nothing grows. By 2070, that's 20%. It's only 1% right now, and it will affect 1/3 of the population of the world. So you might not care about sea level rise. We're in Denver, we're a mile high, but there will be a 50% increase of wildfires by 2100. 100-year floods could happen annually by 2100. Remember that this is what happens with a 1.5 degree increase. A large and growing number of scientists are now saying that we're going to blow way past 1.5 degrees. I won't go into what 2 to 3 degrees, or let alone 3 to 4 degrees, is going to bring. If we go back to the tsunami image, these are the conditions that lead all the water rushing away from the shore. What does the wave look like? This first figure is from the World Bank, a rather conservative institution who is not interested in fear-mongering and upsetting markets, right? The World Bank states that there will be 216 million climate refugees by 2050. That's only 26 years from now. That's an 8 times increase in the number of refugees in the world today. The Institute for Economics and Peace states by 2015, there will be 1.2 billion people displaced by the climate change. Right now, there's 108.4 million. That's an 11-time increase in the number of people who are going to be displaced in the next 26 years. And if you think this hasn't started in the United States, then I remind you of Katrina in 2005, of whom, which happened especially in the Ninth Ward during Hurricane Katrina, and of whom some of those families went, unfortunately, off to Houston only to lose everything again from Hurricane Harvey in 2017. Those were IDPs, internally displaced persons, though we dare not politically call them that, let alone call them climate refugees. Or the Isle de Jean-Charles, which was once 22,000 acres and is now only 320 acres, with a first ever federal government community development block grant to Louisiana of $48.3 million to move the entire remaining Biloxi Chickamauga Choctaw tribe 40 miles north. Or the central Yupik, Alaska native village of Newtok, forced to move 250 people at a cost of $300 million, 7 miles inland. Or perhaps the Inuit tribe in Kavalina, Alaska, whose island is warming twice as fast as anywhere else. They have been asking for funds since 1992 and have received nothing. Their tribe will be forced to break up and become climate refugees or starve to death. Newtok and Kavalina are only 2 of dozens of communities on the brink of sinking into the ocean in Alaska alone. Or even Captain Dan from Miami, who has lived there all his life and watched the sea level rise since the mid-70s. He is selling his home and moving because his state government is in denial. And he wants to sell before others realize how untenable the future of his neighborhood will soon be. Harold Walness, as a side, who's a university professor there and a scientist, has been warning Miami about the effects of climate change since 1981. Flooding in Miami has increased by 400% in the last decade. And as an interesting little note, he claims that Miami will be around for less than 100 years and that Mar-a-Lago will become a diver's Atlantis paradise. The governor's office does not even allow the words climate change or global warming in its reports or communications. So how are you, my entrepreneurs, my builders, to respond to all this? You could build walls along the borders, 2,000 miles for the Mexico-US border, 5,500 miles in the Canadian-US border, but that doesn't solve 2 major problems. In my world of migrants, the answer to a 10-foot wall is an 11-foot ladder. And it doesn't answer the problem of US IDPs. Newtok, Cavallina, New Orleans, Isle de Jean-Charles, Miami are only the beginning. Resilience and adaptation are the key words and concepts. New, bold, risky, and innovative ideas. What will you do with these people on the move? Build more refugee camps where people and families languish for decades? Or create jobs and opportunities that look toward not just sustainability, but a regenerative future? The examples are out there, and they range all the way from the Netherlands to Bangladesh. The Mary Robinson Foundation articulated 7 principles of climate justice, and for time's sake, I'm just going to give you the bullet points. 1, respect human rights. 2, support the right to development. 3, share benefits and burdens equitably. 4, ensure that decisions on climate change are participatory, transparent, and accountable. 5, highlight gender equality and equity. 6, harness the transformative power of education for climate stewardship. And 7, use effective partnerships to secure climate justice. The Stockholm Resilience Center at Stockholm University has its own 7 principles. I'll spend just a tiny bit more with them. The first one is maintain diversity and redundancy. They say in a social ecological system, components such as species, landscape types, knowledge systems, actors, cultural groups, or institutions all provide different options for responding to change and dealing with uncertainty and surprise. 2, manage connectivity. Connectivity can be both a good and a bad thing. High levels of connectivity can facilitate recovery after a disturbance, but highly connected systems can also spread disturbances faster, as we well know. 3, manage slow variables and feedbacks. Social ecological systems can often be configured in several different ways. In other words, there are many ways in which all the variables in a system can be connected and interact with one another, and these different configurations provide different ecosystem services. 4, foster complex adaptive systems thinking. In order for us to continue to benefit from a range of ecosystem services, we need to understand the complex interactions and dynamics that exist between actors and ecosystems in a social ecological system. Management based on complex adaptive systems thinking that appreciates these interactions and the often complex dynamics they create can enhance the resilience of social ecological systems. 5, encourage learning. Knowledge of a system is always partial and incomplete, and social ecological systems are no exception. Efforts to enhance the resilience of social ecological systems must therefore be supported by continuous learning and experimentation. 6, we're almost there, broaden participation. Participation through active engagement of all relevant stakeholders is considered fundamental to building social ecological resilience. It helps build the trust and relationships needed to improve legitimacy of knowledge and authority during decision-making processes. And 7, promote polycentric governance systems. Polycentricity, a governance system in which multiple governing bodies interact to make and enforce rules within a specific policy, arena or location is considered to be one of the best ways to achieve collective action in the face of disturbance and change. Which suggests that the combination of these 2 sets of principles are a winning combination. They overlap, they inform, and support each other. If you guide your sense of entrepreneurship with these principles, not only will you benefit yourselves and your investors, but also your community. Just don't survive, flourish. I noticed that on the front of the garage, you have put in a very bold the statement, make something people want. Might I suggest just a small change to the wording? Make something people need. Thank you.